We are simply a performance tracking tool and a tax reporting solution for investors. And what we let you do is basically ingest your information from whatever online broker or traditional stockbroker you might use. It brings it all into the platform and gives you a standardized view of your performance, along with some of the analytics and, as I mentioned, the tax reports as well.
Today, we have partnered with ShareSite to give away 10 one-year memberships to new ShareSite users. To enter, please fill out the short form in the description box linked below. So today, we have Doug Morris from ShareSite on the show to share an awesome presentation about the product. And this is a product that I really like. I've been using this for years now. So Doug is going to share a short presentation with us, and then we're going to do a Q&A after that. So Doug, I'm just going to hand it off to you. Please go ahead.
Cool. All right. We'll jump in. Thanks, Kyle, for having me. I appreciate it. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Morris, and I'm the CEO of ShareSite. I thought what I'd do is just take you on a quick zoom through the product. If you want to check out ShareSite, please feel free to give it a whirl at sharesite.com, and you can sign up for free. But essentially, what is ShareSite? Well, ShareSite, we're not an online broker. We don't give you investment tips or advice. We're not a robo-advisor. We are simply a performance tracking tool and a tax reporting solution for investors. And what we mean when we say investors is anyone from a new investor just starting out on their investment journey, all the way through to a seasoned, what you might call sophisticated, higher net worth investor. We also have professional investors using the pro version of our product as well, typically fund managers and family office types. And what we let you do is basically ingest your information from whatever online broker or traditional stockbroker you might use. It brings it all into the platform and gives you a standardized view of your performance, along with some of the analytics and, as I mentioned, the tax reports as well. And so this is essentially a demo account that I've got. It sort of does look and feel a little bit like some of my real investment behavior. So do with that what you will. But what we're looking at here is the overview page, which is essentially the homepage of the product. You can see this particular portfolio has a value of $177,000. And as I move down the page, the first thing you'll see is our performance index. Now you might think like, all right, great. I feel like I know how my investments are going. I can log into my broker. I can check, the Apple Stocks app. That's actually just not the case. What you often see when you look at performance on those platforms is a simple calculation difference between today's price and the price you bought it at. It doesn't take into account buys and sells, so money in and out of the investment or the portfolio. It often doesn't take into account dividends either. And so we bring that all into one place, and you can track really from any number of brokers, any number of countries, and then you can pick currencies as well. And so what we're looking at here is an annualized money-weighted return. And you can also see I'm benchmarking myself against an ETF. So my portfolio is the kind of the orange line above, and the benchmark is the red line below. I like using this particular ETF as a benchmark. And the reason for that is it's a diversified, balanced ETF. And so if I ever have a time in my life where I don't have the time to kind of be my own fund manager, or I need to kind of be a bit more defensive, I like to think of this as like a balanced or diversified plan B, really. And you can see that through time, in this case, I've done quite a bit better than the benchmark until interest rates started to rise, and my tech portfolio got smashed, essentially. I also have some Chinese stock exposure in here, which continues to bring down my returns. But then you can see kind of what's happened since the kind of the turnaround of late, thanks in part to AI, fundamentally. So what you can see is I've got a capital gain here. So that's 14.7% per annum per year. I've got a low dividend yield in this portfolio. I have some favorable effects from currency in this, because this portfolio has US, Australian, and as I mentioned, Chinese stocks in here as well. So that gives me my total annualized return of 20%. Moving down the page, you can see the holdings that I have in this portfolio. And again, these can come from different brokers. And so we have various API connections with brokers all around the world, which makes it quite easy to bring in your investment information. If we don't have those automatic links, you can actually just upload or drag and drop documents, and we'll process the portfolio history for you. And then we'll track the ongoing trades as well. And so much like above, you can see my performance on the individual holdings in this particular case. If I jump into a particular stock, we'll grab Amazon. It's always a nice example to use, makes me look smarter. You can see here the overview page for Amazon specifically with respect to my investments. It's information about the performance of the company. And then on another tab, I have my trades and my income as well. So no dividend action with Amazon, of course, but you can see here that this was my original buy back in 2013. We have about 30 years of investment data, so you can go back in time and recreate your performance. There was another purchase I made in 2021, and then a share split in June of 2022. And so ShareSite will automatically handle most of these corporate actions. So like splits and buybacks and spinoffs and takeovers, that'll be recorded in here because they do affect your cost base in many cases, which can then have an impact on the tax you need to report. Speaking of reports, I'll just give a quick flyover of those as well, Kyle. So you can see our library of reports here. We break these into performance, asset allocation, and tax and compliance. One of the reports I like to use is contribution analysis. So we'll run this report, and essentially this shows me my attribution or my performance per investment. And so you can see in this case, I am not grouping any of my investments. I can choose to group by market, currency, and so forth, or my own custom groups, which I'll show you in just a moment. But my default is set to not group because I like to kind of break apart, the egg, so to speak, and see how all the underlying components have contributed or detracted from my return. And straight away, you can see that, I'm a good investor basically because I've got a sizable position in Amazon in this portfolio, right? The detractors are Alibaba and Weibo as well, those Chinese stocks that I mentioned that I'm frankly holding on for dear life to, as we in real life, not just the demo, hoping that they'll turn around. But you can also see I've gotten a nice contribution here from Salesforce CRM as well. And again, you might notice here I've got shares on the NASDAQ. I've got shares on the ASX down here in Sydney, where I live, the NYSE. I've got something on the overseas markets, the pink sheets, and there's another ASX stock 0 down there as well. So again, we cover basically any stock market in the world. We also cover mutual and managed funds, and you can also add cash accounts into the product and your own custom investments as well. So really the idea being you can bring in your total whole of wealth into ShareSite. And just below that, you can see the actual data that underpins that chart above. Another report I'll give us a quick look at is our exposure report. Now, because of the popularity of ETFs amongst the whole world essentially, we had feedback from customers who wanted to see not only what their ETF holdings were, but what was inside those ETFs and how that overlapped with the direct stock positions that they already own. So again, in this case, I'm being asked if I want to group. I'll say don't group, and then I'll run my report. So what this is doing now, it's looking at all my direct holdings, and it's also looking at the underlying positions in those ETFs as well. That's just a quick asset allocation breakdown per holding. But if I scroll down, where it begins interesting is, if we'll pick on Amazon again, you can see that ShareSite is telling me that we've got a direct position in Amazon, and it's also exposure from an ETF as well. And that's because I own both Amazon directly, and I also own an ETF, the VT, which is the Vanguard Total World Stock ETF. So you can imagine in a portfolio where you might be deploying more of a core satellite approach, you might have, 5 or 6 or 8 kind of core, bedrock ETFs that comprise 50 or 60% of your total invested value. And then you have satellites of other individual positions. This report really comes to life for investors like that. Again, this portfolio is not perfectly suited to this example, but hopefully you get the idea. Another report that I'll show probably is just some of the tax reports as well. So taxable income is essentially a dividend report. And again, this is geared to different tax jurisdictions. And so the version you're looking at on my account, despite my accent, it's actually an Australian portfolio, which adheres to the Australian taxation rules. So if you see anything on the screen that looks a bit funny, That's why it complies with the ATO, the Australian Tax Office down here. So in this case, I'm just looking at what we have here, a year's worth of dividends. This is our financial year in Australia, ending 30 June. And you can see what ShareSite does. It breaks it out according to security type. So non-trust income, as we call it down here, is basically just dividends from companies. Foreign income is dividends from my overseas holdings. And then what we do below down here is we actually code the income into buckets that correspond to the alphanumeric tax codes that the tax office needs down under. And you can see in this case, what we also do is we break out all the components of the dividends as well. So again, depending on what tax country you live in, what jurisdiction, you may have to report some of these dividend components, or in the case of the Australian market, a lot of these are actual tax credits inside these dividends that you need to keep your eye on. And then the other report in tax that I'll just show us quickly is the capital gains report. So we have both a capital gains report and an unrealized capital gains report. Unrealized, of course, being positions that you have not yet sold. But this is a useful report as it shows, kind of a hypothetically what your tax liability might be if you do make sales. So in this case, I'm looking at this report as at the 30th of June, 2023. And you can see in this case, I have a bunch of long-term capital gains that are unrealized, the gain listed over here on the right. And then I also have a handful of capital losses that are unrealized as well. So straight away here, I might be thinking as an investor, okay, this might be a time to sell down some of these losers and use it as a tax credit against any tax owing I might have on my portfolio. Again, a nice summary table down here at the bottom. And then on the realized capital gains report, what you can see there is essentially a handy way to pick a time period. I'll just widen that back out to since inception. Haven't made too many sales of late. And you can see what ShareSite's doing. It's showing my long-term capital gains, any discounted capital gains distributions that I might have, again, depending on tax country, and capital losses as well. Specifically for this market, we allow you to change the sale allocation method. I'm not sure how this translates to other markets, but in Australia, you can organize the parcels, the buys and sells as parcels to basically manipulate the outcome for the tax office. And so you can minimize your CGT, you can maximize your CGT, or you can use a FIFO or LIFO approach as well. So this is a really powerful tool embedded in our tax reports for, in this case, for Aussie investors. And I think the final thing I'll show, Kyle, is just some of the under the hood features we have at the account level. One of my favorites is custom groups. So again, what you see here is a portfolio that's complete and set up. But really where ShareSite comes to life is when you kind of bring in all your investment data into one place. You get that standardized performance view, right? But then you can start organizing it and tracking it and tagging it. So we have, as you would have seen, you can group by standard GICs or markets or countries or not at all. You can add labels as well. So a popular thing to do is for people to sort of tag holdings by broker, which then you can propagate throughout the product. And then we have this other feature called custom groups, which I think of really as an asset allocation feature inside the product. So you can create any number of custom groups that you'd like. I'll switch over to my asset allocation. And what I've done here is I've created buckets. So you can basically just create these out of thin air, and then you can drag and drop holdings that you own into the appropriate buckets. And so the way that I think about my asset allocation, how I like to kind of keep track of things, is my core large cap stocks. So Amazon, eBay, Google, PayPal, for example. You might differ from this. It's core large cap. You might think, well, these are actually just big tech stocks, which they are as well. I've got my SaaS stocks, software as a service. Our business model is a SaaS model, so I understand those businesses, and I like to keep track of them separately. I've got my Chinese tech, which I've mentioned. Core ETFs, again, that's kind of more of that core satellite approach, miscellaneous, and so forth. And so if I go back to, let's just say, the homepage, and I opt to group by my custom group, which is Doug's asset allocation. it'll then make those changes all the way down the page. And so the first thing you'll see is my performance, instead of being rolled up to the portfolio level, will now switch to track those customized groups that I've got here, right? So straight away you can see, let's see what's contributed most to my return. Let's get rid of that benchmark because it's kind of distracting me. Yeah, you can see, well, things are pretty correlated to one another, but it's kind of that core large cap that's kind of driven most of my return in my portfolio. And then as you move down the page, you'll see that it groups these in the table as well. So that's a very quick overview of the product. I should also mention you can share access to the portfolio with your spouse or an investment club or an investment partner. Another really popular feature of sharing is sharing with your accountant at tax time as well. We work really well in the space between investors and their accountants. We have a number of accounting software integrations, namely Xero being our most popular one. So essentially what that means is, you make trades with your broker, all that information flows into ShareSite, and it all flows on into the accounting system, which should reduce your accounting bills at tax time as well. So I suppose I'll just stop there, Kyle, and just say thanks for having a look at the product.
Hey guys, it's Clay Fink here, host of We Study Billionaires. Today, I wanted to tell you about our show sponsor, Vacasa. The dream of owning a vacation home can be daunting. From finding the best guests, to the maintenance, to organizing the cleaners after every guest stay. With Vacasa, they make that dream into a reality. As a full-service vacation home management company with vacation homes in key destinations across the US, they know how to make owning a vacation home easy and profitable. On top of proactive property maintenance visits by professional local teams, a data-driven booking platform, and around-the-clock support, homeowners earn on average 20% more revenue from their vacation homes. Vacasa makes vacation home ownership easy. If you're looking to make more from your vacation homes by doing less, partner with Vacasa at vacasa.com. That's vacasa.com.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an excellent presentation. So one of the things that you brought up there at the beginning was, how people compare ShareSite to, say, your Apple app or whatever. And that was a problem that I had when I first started. I look at, for instance, Yahoo Finance was great, but it doesn't accurately show what your performance is. So obviously you did a really good job of kind of showing how ShareSite does that. But I'm interested in knowing what are some of the other kind of really key features that you think distinguishes ShareSite compared to some of these other bigger things that people that are well known, like Yahoo Finance, for instance.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the biggest thing that we do is we take into account what we would argue is your true performance, right? So Yahoo Finance, the Apple Stocks app, all that's showing you is today's price divided by original price equals percent, right? And so you get these wacky percent returns where you've got like 2,000% return, right? But it's like, well, yeah, but what does that mean, right? And in many cases, these kind of more surface layer apps are only showing you percentages. They're not concerned with actual dollar returns, right? So we do money weighted returns and we annualize the performance as well. And that's a judgment call. Often we talk to more institutional type investors, be they fund managers, and they say, hey, Doug, I really want a total return calculation in here. And we're very, I think, sort of philosophically against that, because it's like, well, yeah, sure, I know why you want a total return, but it's like, that's not actually an investor's return through time, right? You think about these things in annual chunks, which is how we think about our lives financially, right? And the other side of that is the dividend stuff. Dividends might seem straightforward, right? It's just a ratio, it's a payout. They're not. They're really funky, especially if you're using a DRP, so a dividend reinvestment plan, which you can switch on if the holding or the company allows it in the product. And that's where, if you think about what a DRP is, it's fundamentally just little micro buys on an automated basis. Things like Yahoo or Apple, they can't handle that kind of stuff because it's cost-based adjustments, right? Our product was built by an accountant originally. It goes pretty deep in terms of its accuracy. We take that quite seriously. And then the final thing I'd say, I guess, is the tax side as well. We do the taxable income and the CGT stuff too, which those kind of more media-friendly apps, I suppose I'd call them, don't provide.
Yeah, and so another thing that I've noticed that I really liked about ShareSite was that you guys are always improving the product. So I'm interested in understanding a little bit better, how do you guys go about gathering feedback from your users and making the product, as
Yeah.
user friendly as possible for them?
We get a lot. We get a lot of feedback, and any kind of software company, there's always a very good deliberations and battles internally about what we build and importantly what we don't build. Because everything you build, you need to maintain. And so what we do is a number of ways. The primary being our community forum, which you can access through the application itself, or just search ShareSite community and you'll find it. That's a pretty lively forum around investors talking to one another and providing us feedback. And so what we do is we take that information on basically a monthly basis, and we run it through an internal process where we evaluate, okay, how popular is this idea? What do we think about this idea? Can we do it? Can we maintain it? And so it's pretty systematic process, really. But it's always a case of kind of listening to your customers and trying to make everybody happy. But there's always going to be a constituency of people who want you to build X or Y that won't be used by the majority of the user base as well.
Of course. So obviously, you guys are in tech. It's it is technically kind of like a SaaS type product. So I'm interested in knowing, how are you guys leveraging AI, tech, or anything, if at all, in
Sure.
in the future of the
Yeah.
company?
Yeah. No, it's not a day goes by we're not talking about our AI opportunity. I think in our case, it's kind of funny. So we've been around a while. ShareSite was actually started by a father and son in New Zealand, of all places, like back in 2008, like just after the financial crisis. I got involved shortly later as CEOs as an investor. So we always joke that those guys invented a freemium SaaS product in fintech before any of that was cool, right? And they kind of just did it. They were brilliant guys, and they kind of backed into all this. So yeah, but we are a tech company. The majority of our staff are engineers and technologists, and we're always building out innovative problems. Products no way done. So our challenges are, we've got a pretty big user base, right? And everything you do in ShareSite is kind of on the fly calculated. So anytime you make an adjustment, a trade, a dividend, it recalcs everything. So one of the things we've worked on a lot is making that a lot faster for customers. Because it wasn't that long ago, and I worked in investment research before coming to ShareSite. A lot of this stuff was done in these really crunchy software platforms that were downloaded, right? And then the price information would update like on an overnight batch file and blah, blah, blah. And so they were faster, but that's because they were offline. But what we do, everything is cloud-based, and that is kind of an antiquated term, but it's actually hard to do. And so we put a lot of time and emphasis into making the product fast. I won't go into too much more detail on that because I'll probably bore the viewers to death. But on the AI front, yeah, that's a really great opportunity for us. So we're sitting on a lot of investor information, and I don't mean to scare anybody by saying private information. I'm talking about totally anonymized, ring fenced, buy and sell and sort of investment decision data. And so the question we're having at the senior level of the business now is, okay, what do we do with that? How can we actually do something that's not just going to get us a couple of clicks or some attention? How do we do something that actually can solve problems for customers, can help make people better investors? And so I can't reveal exactly what our plans are, but I'd say watch this space, because we're lucky in the sense that we have a large structured database that we can then put a large language model over, an AI model over, and start doing things with it essentially. So yeah, watch this space, I would say, but it's not a term, topic, or idea that goes without being uttered inside ShareSite every single day at every single board meeting from investors, from customers. So yeah.
So besides obviously that cool use case that you just mentioned, are there any other recent technological advancements that have been implemented with ShareSite that you can share?
So mostly it's just on the feature side. So that exposure report that I showed that breaks down the components of the ETF is our kind of our latest core release. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff which is in progress right now around multi-asset class tracking. So at the moment, you can track cash accounts in ShareSite, as I mentioned. You can create custom investments, things like property, houses, collectibles, things like that. They're kind of supplementary features that are sort of in the background, to be honest, on the product, because as it's our name, ShareSite, it's always been about tracking shares or stocks. So we're really going to pivot ourselves to become more of a total wealth, whole of wealth investment tracking platform. So I think you'll see us do a lot more, again, using AI, hopefully, where it's like, oh, I've got a statement from something. Can I just whack that into the product and can it then work out what it is and what it's worth to my portfolio? Another one is a new mobile app that's coming quite soon. We've got an old mobile app that's been deprecated, and as if any of you know, mobile apps are tricky because you need two of them and you got to maintain them, and it's not cheap. So we've got some new mobile stuff coming out as well. And I think just our overall UX has changed quite considerably. So you might have noticed when I jumped into that Amazon example, the page took me by surprise. That's actually just been released only as of last week. I'm like a alpha beta user or whatever, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, we've got a brand new holdings page. So that kind of more modern look and feel is kind of rolling out as we speak throughout the product.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up because when you open the page, I was like, is this like a different version of ShareSite? I've never seen that before because I obviously I go in there all the time to add holdings and whatnot. So that was interesting to see. So my other question is, what do you think is next for ShareSite? Obviously you've just shared some of these cool things that you maybe are going to be implementing with AI, but what are other exciting, features, projects that are in your pipeline that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think you'll see a lot more around the dividend space from ShareSite. So we've got our designs in progress right now. We've got some stuff on the roadmap that is focused on dividend investors, yield investors. Frankly, dividends have always been part of our DNA. I know that, actually, if you're investing in American stocks, people don't necessarily care about dividends. I think that the dividend yield on the S&P is like 1% maybe compared to say 4% in the UK or 5%. But down here in Australia and New Zealand, people love dividends. And the reason is there's really generous tax rebates, as I mentioned, baked into those dividends called franking credits. And I think they only exist in Australia amongst the world's sort of larger, more retail-friendly investment markets. So we've always done dividends really well. But what people want is they want dividend forecasting. They want more predictive dividend information. They want planning, almost like in a calendar sense, and that'll kind of take us into more of a goal setting framework as well. So working on that stuff again alongside getting more of that total wealth picture into ShareSite.
Well, Doug, this has been an excellent conversation. I just want to hand it off to you. Do you have any closing remarks for the audience?
No, just give us a try. If you haven't signed up for ShareSite, you can try it for free. It's an unlimited free plan. You can track up to 10 stocks in there, give it a whirl, kick the tires. If you like what you see, consider upgrading. But other than that, just thanks for having me on, Kyle. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
100 baggers are essentially companies that are compounding machines. Also remember that sometimes you'll find companies that have high returns on capital, but they don't have many opportunities to actually reinvest back into the business. Maybe they've tapped out the market they're in, or the market they're in is just too mature. You need to both have high return on capital and the long runway to continue to make those reinvestments for long periods of time.